Someone left them to die in a torn cardboard box. No food, no blanket, just 2 newborns. Barely breathing, dumped in dark outside the shelter gates at sunrise, they found the box damp, cold left. Just inches from the shelter, Gates, no note, no sound only. The soft breath off life inside a volunteer, knelt down hard already, heavy with what they might see but, when she opened the flaps. Her breath caught curled together inside. Tiny shivering were a Bobcat kitten and a Labrador retriever pup, no older than 5 weeks. They didn't cry, they didn't stir, they were pressed so tightly against H. The other, it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. The pup's head rested under the kitten's chin, one paw draped over his back like a shield they wear, trembling. Hungry, cold, but still asleep, as if they knew that only Lycothese together they were safe. They had noms, no tags, no sign of a mother or human. Just 2 babies alone in a box, left in the silence before morning. No one knew who had left them, or why. Only one thing was clear: they had been holding on to each other for a very long time. No one knew who had left them. Orho, they ended up in that box together, a wild animal and a domestic. Pup born into different worlds, yet clinging to one another like twins. But Everyone nursed one thing the moment they were brought inside. They were together for a reason. They had no names, no story, no trace of where they'd come from. Just the heavy silence of Survival between them. The pup, a golden Labrador, was barely able to stand, his front leg swollen from a joint injury. Thought made every movement a struggle. The Bobcat kitten, smaller still, had the beginnings of frostbite on her ears and paw pads, and her body showed signs of severe dehydration. They had been out there for hours, maybe longer. The staff moved quickly, wrapping them in heated towels, administering fluids, checking vitals. For a moment, everything became procedure. Ack! Until someone tried to separate them. The moment the vet gently lifted the puppy, just to take him for asking, the kitten came alive in a way no one expected. She sprang up, eyes wide with alarm, and began clawing at the glass of the observation room, then shelled out a sound no one in that shelter would forget. A low, broken wail, not a growl, not a hiss, a cry full of desperation. She scraped her tiny claws against the barrier, frantic, confused, willed. They rushed to bring the pup back. Moment he returned, she quieted, she pressed herself against him, nose to his fur, and began to breathe slower. One-offed texts, whispered barely above a breath. She looked at him like he was the only thing she's ever known, like Hewent, just her brother. He was her world from the very first days. It was clear this Bobcat wasn't like the others. They named her Sage. There was something old in her eyes, not wild, wiser, and the pup with soft gold fur and a heart that beat for her. They called River Sage never left his side, not for food, not for rest, not even when her own body needed karat. Night she curled around him, her small frame wrapped protectively along his back when River whimpered in pain from his healing leg. Sagia pressed her nose to his and stayed still as if lending him her breath, and when volunteers carried her to the medical bay for daily treatment, River would cry out a sharp hedging bark that echoed through the halls until she returned. They were young, fragile, different in every way, natural, cold design, but they moved as one. Not just bonded, fused. Sage didn't display fear or aggression toward the staff. She was cautious, yes, but never wild. Her energy remained focused only on River. Asif, the chaos of her instincts, had quieted in his presence, and River, despite his pain, would struggle to receive. She wasn't near. He'd drag himself, stirred the scent of her toward the spot she had just left. None of the staff had ever seen anything like it. This was Nakan's pairing, no survival fluke. They didn't just adapt to each other. One a luntier whispered they became one bunk to halves, and separating them would break. Bothaned so for the first time in Theshelter's history. A decision was Madion that went against every handbook and policy. They would be raised together. Thapin, during a routine feeding, River was growing stronger, limping, less eager no to eat on his own. He padded clumsily toward the communal bowl, tail wagging low. Several other dogs, larger and louder, were already there. One of them, an older Shepherd mix, bumped River aside without meaning harm, just asserting space, but Ina Flash Sage was there. She launched severed from the corner of the room. No hesitation, her body low, eyes locked, ears flat. She didn't attack, she didn't claw or bite, but she placed herself between River and the other dog with a sound known of the volunteers had ever heard from. Her before a deep, guttural, growl-protective, unmistakable every muscle in her small frame. Shook not from fear, but from readiness, her message. It was Cleary's mine. The older dog backed off, startled, and in thistulence that followed River stepped forward. And nuzzled against Sage's sittish, didn't move, she just stood there watching him. Eat her body a living barrier that wasn't wild and stinksamine. Murmured that was love, that was loyalty. From that moment on, the staff saw her differently, not just as a bobcat net, even as a rescued animal, but as a guardian, a sister, a soul, tethered to one another. Their bond only deepened with time. They played like siblings. Rough, clumsy, full of joy, Riverwood bound a word, Sage with his signature lopsidedron, and she would leap over him in a blur of golden fur. They chased shadow-stole blankets and curled into Onenether. The moment they tired, they were growing together own evening. Just before lights out, a volunteer named April lingered a little longer in their room. She watched as Sage circled twice before settling beside River. He was already drifting off, but as lay down, he stirred, lifted his head and stretched forward to gently lick Herchk. April lifted her phone and presaid record. Ickard. Sage's eyes closed. River exhaled fell asleep, nose to nose, breathing in sync, as if they'd done it every night of their lives. She posted the video later that night. The caption read, "We didn't know how they found each other. But we know one thing, no one's hold ever separate them." By morning, video had exploded millions of views, of thousands of comments. People wrote, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Their friendship has no boundaries. I didn't know I needed the state letters began to arrive. Donations, food supplies, strangers drove hours just to ask, is it true? Is the bobcat really raising the puppy?
Out!
And the volunteers mauled and said, no, they're raising each other. Sage began to change, not in the way wild things usually do when surrounded by people, retreating, gristing. Shrinking into instinct, shedded the opposite. She started to open it, begin with River as always, but sooner there's noticed something remarkable. The other puppies were drawn to her, timid ones, injured ones, orphans, just like she and River once were. They'd wander toward her tails. Low nose switching, and Sage didn't push them away, stayed still, let them come closest. Sometimes she'd sniff their heads, bump her nose softly against their sides. Other times she'd simply lie there, eye shelf closed, as if saying, you're Safi here too. The volunteers kept filming. They couldn't help it. What they were seeing was rare. A wild animal, not just tolerating others, but welcoming. Theamone videos showed Sage watching as Twotney Terrier pups wrestled near her. Pawthos yelped, and she gently reached out a paw, not claws, just a soft nudge. The caption read, we've never seen a bobcat. Poma mentor. The response was overwhelming again, but the moment that stayed with everyone came late one afternoon. A volunteer walked into the main room and froze. There was Sage Lingen, the center of the floor, calm, regal. 3 small puppies were curled against their side, one on her back, another with his head resting on her leg. River sat close by, upright, like a proud older brother. Watching, guarding. Sage wasn't just the wild rescue anymore. It was the heart of the shelter, not a threat, not a mystery, a center of gravity. A teacher. They were growing faster than any unexpected. River had healed. Completely strong, playful, loyal, everything a family could want. He was ready for a Homea couch, to sleep on a leash, and a Namatag end. Sage, she was larger, now more confident. Her coat rich and wild. It wastes time, they said, to transition her into a rehabilitation enclosure for wild cats. Step toward release, a return to the life nature intended. But no one could prepare them for what happened next when they tried separating them just for a few hours at a time. River in one wing, Sagine the other. It was as if something's napids stopped eating. She paced her enclosure, pressing her face to the wire, eyes wide, tail twitching when shackled and fined. River sent nearby Shellet out a low, hollow sound that chilled every yon who heard it, and River refused to settle. He scratched at Dorschwind, barked into empty spaces. His food remained untouched. His eyes scanned at every show. Where every time we pulled them apart, one staff member said it felt like we were breaking something. Inside both of them, they had survived because they had each other. They had grown because they were together, and then came answer simple, quit, and so right it felt like it had been waiting all along. They would not be separated. Instead, a new arrangement was offered. Sage would live in the protected lands of a nearby wildlife sanctuary, free but safe in river. He would come with her, not as a pet, not as a trainee, as her companion, her partner, her familiar. It was unheard of, but then again so was everything about them. The videos kept spreading clips of River and Sage walking side by side through the tall grass, of Sage rolling gently onto her back, as River playfully nudged her off to resting under the trees, shoulder to shoulder, breathing in rhythm. Millions watched, thousands commented, but true magic began when the sanctuary opened its gates, not just to the online world, but to people in person. They called them encounter days. Familia served with wide eyes, children pressed their faces to the viewing glass. Elderly couples sat quietly, hand in hand. Veterans, teachers, cancer survivors, people who had lost, people who were still looking for something, and Sage Wilder, an abandoned name tamed, met them. With stillness, shade, and growl, she didn't hide. She stepped closer, looked into their eyes, held their gaze with a quiet calm that said more than any words could. Each visit felt like a secret being shared, like a window into something sacred. And River, faithful as ever, was always the first to greet them. If a child hesitated, he walked forward slowly, tail low and soft. If Somion in a wheelchair reached out a hand, he pressed his head gently into their palm, and Sage followed always bend him, as if the courage he gave her was enough to meet the world one soul at a time. People cried, not from sadness, from recognition. They weren't just looking at a bobcat and a dog. They were witnessing love that crossed the boundaries of species, instinct, and survival. Every visit ended the same way, quiet awe and hope. Their story spread far beyond the sanctuary gates. Treached classrooms, dinner tables, hospital rooms. It reminded people of love, unexpected, unconditional offering,ship that doesn't ask questions, flow. Even in the hardest moments, we don't thave to break. If someone is beside you, schools began organizing fundraisers and drawings, bracelets, home keys to support shelters with pups like River, left behind but still full of hope. Children wrote letters. I want to help animals like Sage and River. They show us how to be kind at the shelter where it all began. The number of volunteers doubled, then tripled. Radiokers, teenagers, single parents, people, had never stepped into a shelter before. Now they came every week, rolled up their sleeves, and whispered it's because of them. And when visitors arrived at the sanctuary, they didn't just come to see the wild bobcat grew up with a puppy. They came to feel something, to believe again in the gentle strength of connection, to remember that love can survive the coldest nights, deepest wounds, the longest odds. If a bobcat can love a puppy, one visitor said softly, tears in her eyes, then maybe we can learn to be gentler with each other. 2 years have passed. Sage now lives in a wide open enclosure on the edge of the sanctuary, surrounded by trees, wind, and space to run. River is still with Haraways by her side. They're not babies anymore. Sage moves with grace and quiet power. River, strong and calm, follows her like a shadow. But some things never change at night. When the world quiets and the stars settle above them, they still sleep, pressed close, nose to furchest to chest, as if no time has passed at all. We never found out who left Thaman that torn cardboard box. We don't know where they came from, but we do know why they were brought into this world, to remind us that goodness is possible even in places that feel lost, even in hearts thought once knew only fear. Sometimes, if it leaves a box at your door, and inside itis a chance to become something better. This is the story of a bobcat and a puppy, of the fear of being torn apart, off the strength of love, and of how one new likely bond can light a fire in hundreds of hearts. Follow hope and first or more stories that move and connect us, and if this one touched you, share it, because you never know who might need to believe in something good today.